The clock on my phone read 11:51 p.m. when the screen lit up like a blade sliding out of the dark. One message from Mob. We've agreed, you're no longer part of this family. Don't come to gatherings. Don't call, no explanation. No tremor. Just exile, typed out and sent like an eviction notice for my soul. 3 seconds later, Lila hearted it. My little sister, pressing that tiny red icon like it was nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, the blue glow painting, the walls of my quiet apartment, and started canceling everything. Mortgage autopay, car insurance, their phones, the streaming accounts they never paid for. Every click felt like pulling a plug on a life support machine I'd been chained to for years. By 12:03 a.m., their world began flickering out, one service at a time. I leaned back, heart strangely calm. The way it gets right before a storm decides to tear the sky open. For the first time in forever, the silence in my home didn't feel lonely. It felt like justice putting on lipstick. I was 28 the first time I saved them from foreclosure. 28 and scraping rent together while wiring thousands I didn't have. Mom had called me her guardian angel that day. Angels, I learned, are just unpaid interns with wings. I poured a glass of wine, watched the city breathe outside my window, and let the memories surface like bruises I finally had permission to press. Every late-night call that began with Alina, we just need a little help this month. Every tuition payment for Leela's business degree that somehow funded beach resorts and designer bags. Every time, Dad borrowed my card for gas and somehow bought a flat screen instead. I'd told myself it was love. Tonight, I saw it for what it was, a subscription. They never intended to renew themselves. The apartment was immaculate color-coded shelves, labeled drawers, my armor against the chaos they raised me in. But tonight, the order turned weapon. Every receipt I'd kept, every automatic withdrawal, glowed on the screen like evidence in a trial I was finally ready to prosecute. I opened a new spreadsheet, columns for date, amount, reason, proof. My fingers moved faster than thought. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, something ancient unclenched in my chest. I wasn't losing a family. I was auditing one, and the balance was about to come due. The first missed call came at 6:47 a.m., Dad. Then Mom, then Lila. 3 times in a row, I let them ring in 2. Voicemail, each vibration a small, delicious tremor of power. By 8:12 a.m., the text started. Lila, you're overreacting. Mom didn't mean it like that. Can we just talk? No apology. Just the same old leash dressed up as concern. I sipped coffee, black and scalding, and typed one line to Mom's email demanding I fix the mess I'd made. I'm busy reconciling accounts. You should do the same. Send. The phone exploded instantly. I watched it dance across the table, screen flashing their names like warning lights, and felt nothing but the slow, exquisite bloom of control. They thought exile was their weapon. They had no idea I still held the deed to the house they bragged about owning, and I'd never transferred the title. By noon, the panic was deliciously audible in their messages. Dad, the utilities are off. Your mother's losing it. Lila, why are you doing this? You're ruining everything. Ruining everything, as if my existence had ever been anything but a safety net they danced on with knives. I saved every text, every voicemail, every tear-soaked plea. Claire, my attorney friend since college, had taught me years ago. Document everything when family turns feral. Tonight, I finally understood why. At 6 p.m., I poured a second glass of wine, deeper red this time, and stared at the cursor blinking over my name. Alina Moreau. How many times had I signed it on checks, leases, guarantees? Tonight, it would sign something else. I opened the property records. The house, their precious marble-countered castle, was still legally mine. One technicality. One forgotten transfer, one instinct I'd never questioned. I smiled into the dark. Slow and dangerous. They'd turned the lights off on me. Now it was my turn, and right as the city slipped into velvet night, I hit the button that would freeze every account tied to that address. Somewhere across town, their perfect little world went black. My phone lit up again, Mom, screaming on voicemail, voice cracking like thin ice. I pressed it to my ear just long enough to hear the first sob, and ended the call. The second night tasted different. Not rage anymore. Something colder, smoother, like aged whiskey sliding over ice. I sat cross-legged on the couch in silk. Shorts and an old college t-shirt, hair loose down my back, laptop glowing against my bare thighs. Every new notification was a pulse between my legs. Proof. They were finally feeling what I'd carried for years. Claire called at 11:07 p.m. Alina. She said, voice low and satisfied, "The first demand letter is ready." Calm, factual, lethal. Want me to read it to you? I closed my eyes. Let her velvet legal words wash over me. Standing balances totaling $312,400. 30 days to propose repayment or face litigation. When she finished, the silence on the line felt intimate, like we'd just made love to justice. "Send it," I whispered. She did. 12 minutes later, the storm broke. "Dad, let's be reasonable, sweetheart." "Mom, how could you do this to your own mother?" "Lila, you're insane. You're actually insane." I read them slowly, savoring the tremor in every word. They weren't shocked I'd been used. They were shocked I'd stopped. I poured a third glass of wine, something expensive I'd bought for a celebration that never came. Tonight felt close enough. The liquid caught the city lights, blood red and beautiful. I took a photo of the glass against the screen full of their frantic messages and saved it. Evidence of the moment Mercy died at 12:41. A.M. I opened the inheritance folder I'd never dared touch before. Grandmother's trust. The one Mom swore had dried up years ago. Bank statements. Signature pages, my name crossed out in blue ink. Her handwriting replacing mine. $40,000 withdrawn. The same month, their kitchen got Italian marble and Lila flew first class to Bali. I traced the forged loop of my own signature with one fingertip, slow, almost tender. Then I forwarded everything to Claire with a single line. Add fraud. Make it hurt. By 2 a.m., the city was asleep. But I was wide awake. Skin humming. I slipped into the shower just to feel the hot water chase the last of the guilt off my body. Steam curled around me like forgiveness I no longer needed from them. I let my head fall back, water streaming over my throat, breasts the curve of my stomach. And for the first time in years, I touched myself without shame, not for anyone else, just for me, because I was finally fully mine. Morning came silver and sharp. Claire's next email, injunction filed. Assets frozen. House included. I read it in bed, sheets cool against my skin, and felt something inside me arch like a cat in sunlight. They woke up to silence, no heat, no Wi-Fi, no illusion of safety. I woke up to power. The buzzer sounded at 8:32 p.m. the following night through the peephole. Mom on my doorstep. Eyes swollen, clutching a manila envelope like a white flag. "Alina," she croaked when I cracked the door. "We're losing everything. Do something for your sister." The word sister scraped across my skin like sandpaper. I took the envelope she offered inside. A pathetic, handwritten IOU on notebook paper let a slow smile curve my mouth. "I already did something for Lila," I said softly. I stopped, her face crumpled. She reached for me, fingers trembling. "You were always the strong one. Fix this, please." I looked at the woman who'd taught me love was endurance and saw only a stranger begging for the drug. I'd finally quit dealing. "Goodbye, Mom." I closed the door, locked it, leaned my forehead against the cool wood, and breathed until her sobbing faded down the hallway. Back inside, I opened the bottle of champagne I'd chilled for no reason months ago. The cork popped loud enough to echo through the empty rooms. I didn't drink from a glass, just straight from the bottle. Bubbles racing over my tongue like tiny fireworks. Claire texted, "Eviction paperwork filed. Title still in your name. They have 7 days." I raised the bottle to the dark window, to the city, to the woman I was becoming. My phone buzzed again. "Unknown number," I answered, voice honeyed steel. "Miss Morrow. Sarah Klein, probate office. We flagged irregularities in your grandmother's estate. Signature forgery. We'll need your statement." I closed my eyes, felt the champagne fizz through my bloodstream. "Send everything to Claire Laurent," I said, "and thank you." I ended the call and stood at the window. City lights glittering like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there they were cold, afraid, unraveling. In here I was warm, naked under silk, untouchable. The contrast tasted better than the champagne. I slipped back into bed, skin still singing, and opened the spreadsheet one last time, row after row of what I'd given. I highlighted it all $312,400. Hit delete. The screen went blank, so did the last tether. But just as I closed the laptop, a new email pinged. Subject: "We need to meet. In person. Tomorrow from Lila." And attached was a single photo taken inside what used to be my grandmother's bedroom. Now stripped bare mattress on the floor. She was sitting on it, mascara streaked, eyes red. For the first time in her life. My little sister looked small. I stared at the photo until the screen dimmed. Tomorrow she wanted to meet, and something dark and hungry inside me whispered, "Let her." She chose a quiet cafe downtown, the kind with low lighting and velvet chairs that swallow sound. I arrived early, ordered an espresso, and let the steam curl against my lips while I waited. When Lila walked in, the air shifted. She looked smaller than the photo, hair pulled back, no makeup, wearing an old hoodie that used to be mine. For a second, the sight punched the breath out of me. Then I remembered whose tears had paid for every designer piece she ever owned, and the feeling passed. She slid into the opposite chair like she was afraid it might bite. "Alina," she started. Voice cracked from crying or screaming, maybe both. I just looked at her and sipped. The silence stretched until it hurt her more than me. Finally, she pushed an envelope across the table. Inside, a cashier's check for $12,000 and a handwritten letter folded so many times it was soft. "I sold everything I could," she whispered. "The bags, the jewelry you bought me, the camera from graduation. It's not much, but it's a start." I didn't touch the check. I read the letter instead. Page after page of apologies, memories, admissions. How she'd known Mom was forging papers. How she'd spent the Bali trip money on clothes and parties while I worked double shifts. How every time she called me to serious, it was because looking at me made her feel the weight of what they were doing. The last line was in shaky ink. "I hate who I became when being spoiled was easier than loving you back." I folded the letter slowly, set it on top of the check, and slid both back to her. Her eyes filled. "You won't even take this?" "No," I said, voice soft, almost tender. "Because money was never the debt, Lila. Respect was." She flinched like I'd slapped her. I leaned forward, close enough to smell the faint trace of my old perfume still clinging to the hoodie. "Do you know what it felt like to read that I was out of the family?" She opened her mouth, closed it. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 15 years. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "Mom's talking about rehab now," she said. "For the spending. Dad just drinks and stares at walls. They keep asking when you're going to forgive us so everything can go back to normal." I laughed, low, husky. The sound of someone who finally knows her own worth. Tell them normal died the night they pressed send on that message. The barista brought me another espresso. I wrapped both hands around the warm cup and let the heat sink into my palms. Lila watched my fingers like she was memorizing them. "I miss you," she said. So quietly, I almost didn't hear. "I miss who I thought you were," I answered. But that girl never existed. She was just the version I paid to keep alive. She started crying in earnest then, shoulders shaking, trying so hard to stay quiet that it tore something open in the air between us. I didn't move to comfort her. I've done that dance too many times instead. I reached into my bag and took out a single house. Keitha spare to the home that was no longer theirs. I placed it on the table between us like a full stop. "The new owners?" "Move in next week," I said. I kept this one last key. Thought someone should have it who remembers what that house used to mean. She stared at the key like it was burning. "I can't. You don't have to. Just know every room you grew up in now belongs to a young couple with a baby on the way. They painted the nursery the soft yellow you always wanted for your bedroom and never got." Her sob broke free then. Raw and ugly and honest. I stood, smoothing my dress over my hips, feeling the silk skim my skin like approval. "One more thing," I said. She looked up, eyes swollen. "I'm keeping grandmother's trust. All of it. After legal fees and taxes, there's enough left for me to disappear for a while. Maybe Italy. Maybe nowhere. Somewhere with sunlight and no ghosts." I leaned down, close enough that only she could hear. "I hope you find a way to become someone you don't have to hide from. Lila, I really do." Then I kissed the top of her head. Once. Soft Fineland walked out without looking back. Outside, the afternoon light was golden and forgiving. I slipped on sunglasses and let the city wrap around me like a lover who'd waited years for me to be free. My phone. Buzzed Claire. Closing documents signed. Proceeds wired. "You're done." I smiled, slow and wide, and turned it off. That night, Matteo cooked for me in his loft fresh pasta, sage butter, a bottle of Barolo that cost more than Leela's apology check. He didn't ask questions. Just traced the curve of my shoulder with one fingertip while the sauce reduced, like he could taste the victory on my skin. Later, in the dark, he pulled me on top of him, hands sliding up my back, mouth hot against my throat. "Tell me what you need," he whispered. I rocked against him, slow and deliberate, feeling every inch of the life I'd reclaimed. "Just this," I breathed. "Just you. Just mine." Afterward, we lay tangled city lights striping the sheets. He brushed hair from my face. "Where to tomorrow?" "Anywhere the past can't follow," I said, and meant it. But just as sleep tugged at me, my phone lit up on the nightstand one new message from an old family group chat I'd never left. "Mom, we're moving into a one-bedroom. If you ever want to talk." I stared at the screen until it went dark again. Then I turned it face down, rolled into Matteo's warmth, and let the silence answer for me. Except the next morning, Claire called with one last bombshell in her voice. "Alina. They're contesting the will. They hired a lawyer. They're claiming undue influence." I laughed into the sunlight pouring through the window. "Let them try," I said. "I've got nothing left to lose, and everything to protect." Asterisk, they dragged it out for 3 more months. Just long enough for winter to bite and the city to turn silver with cold. Every court date, every motion, every tear-stained affidavit they filed felt like a love letter written in disappearing ink. I wore black to every hearing, silk blouses that skimmed my collarbones, pencil skirts that whispered when I walked. Power looks good on a woman. Who's done apologizing? Claire was merciless. She laid the forged signatures under the judge's magnifying glass, lined up the marble counter receipts against the exact withdrawal dates, played the voicemails where Mom begged me to keep paying so the neighbors wouldn't know. The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and their desperation. I never raised my voice. I didn't need to. The numbers screamed for me. One afternoon in early March, the judge ruled. Fraud confirmed. Trust restored. Sanctions against them for filing in bad faith. When the gavel fell, I felt it in my spine like the first warm day after a long freeze. Outside the courthouse, snow was melting in the gutters. Running fast and clean toward the drains, Claire hugged me hard enough to bruise. It's over. Alina? No, I whispered against her hair. It's finally mine. That night I flew to Rome on the money they'd tried to steal. I checked into a small hotel near the Spanish Steps. Windows open to the scent of jasmine and exhaust. I walked until my feet hurt. Ate pasta carbonara in a trattoria where no one knew my name. Drank wine that tasted like sunlight and revenge. In the mornings, I sat on the balcony in nothing but Matteo's shirt he'd slipped into my suitcase. Skin kissed by spring and answered exactly 0 messages. Back home, the stories trickled in through cousins who still spoke to me. Mom took a night job cleaning offices. Dad sold the last of his golf clubs. Lila moved into a studio the size of a closet and got a real job retail, minimum wage. The kind where you stand all day and smile at. Strangers, they learned what it feels like when the safety net disappears and the ground is exactly as hard as you always feared. I didn't gloat. I simply stopped looking back. In May, Matteo met me in Posano. We rented a house clinging to the cliff. Bougainvillea spilling over white walls. The sea so blue it hurt to stare at it too long. We made love in the afternoons with the shutters open. Salt wind cooling the sweat on our skin. My name on his lips like a prayer. He'd waited years to say. At night, we walked barefoot to the little restaurant at the bottom of 1,000 steps. Held hands under the table, and spoke of nothing heavier than what gelato flavor to try next. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the water, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Not a ring, something better. A key to the apartment I bought downtown, he said. Voice rough with everything we hadn't said yet. No ghosts. No debts. Just us. I kissed him so hard we almost fell off the terrace wall into the sea. I moved in on the first day of summer. White walls. High windows. Plants I watered myself. I kept one thing from the old life. The spreadsheet, not the numbers, the empty file. I open it sometimes, stare at the blank rows, and feel the same rush I used to get from his mouth on my throat. Freedom looks like this. Clean page and a life no one can bill me for. 6 months later, on a quiet October morning, I got the last message I'd ever read from them. An email from Mom. Subject line blank. Inside. A single photograph, the 3 of them on a sagging couch in a bare apartment. Christmas lights strung crookedly behind them. No text. Just the picture. I looked at it for a long time, felt the old ache try to rise, and realized it had no teeth left. I deleted the email, closed the laptop, and walked into the kitchen where Matteo was making coffee, shirtless, humming something low and Italian. He slid a hand around my waist, palm warm against the small of my back. Everything okay? He asked against my neck. Everything, I said, turning in his arms, is finally paid in full. I never heard from them again, and I never looked back.